The Democrat Party is so out of touch with the public. What they believe and what their aspirations are not aligned with any more than a small fraction of the country. Yet, since they control the media and many primary institutions, they have been able to control the narrative. Consequently, they have pulled the public in their direction, which would likely never have happened otherwise. Due to their deceptive messaging, people follow them. Many without a touch of understanding as to what lies inside the finely crafted box that the messages are being presented to them in. The public has swung much farther than I would have ever expected. History has shown us how far the public can both blindly and willfully go, but maybe due to a sense of optimism or hope, I did not believe things would get carried to the point where we stand today. Although, thankfully, it seems that everybody that has been complacent, naive, or even ignorant to the matter is waking up. I have to admit that, in theory, the Democrats' plan to reach out to the children to ensure that they are conditioned as early as possible was a good strategy for strengthening their party as well as their ideals. It's like when you build a home. You need a strong foundation that everything else gets built on top of. But in reality, this has shown itself to be a self-destructing plan. Whenever you go after the vulnerable, especially somebody's kids, people, especially parents, are willing to go scorched earth to protect them. As with many other examples, the Democrats are utilizing their typical sequence of excuses for when they execute on cultural change. First, they state that what is happening is not actually happening. They try gaslighting you into not believing what every sense in your body is telling you. Next, they eventually admit that it is happening, but it's no big deal really. They try to convince you that you should live and let live. Why let it bother you? Lastly, they will maintain their admission that it is happening, but now they claim that it's good for you. But at this point, it does not matter because it is likely too late. They have embedded their change into the culture so much that it has become the norm. Now, anything that challenges it will be viewed as a foreign concept. We are currently seeing this pattern play out when it comes to how they are using the children as pawns for cultural change. They are playing the long game, understanding they are building the next generation. Once the next generation becomes adults, what was normalized to them will be passed on as the standard to their next generation. Essentially, the Democrats are attempting to plant the seeds within the youngest among us, so they can spread across the earth like wildflowers in the many years to come. If they were teaching children commonly held values, such as family, perseverance, and self-reliance, this would be fine. In fact, it would be encouraged. But this is not what they are doing. They are working towards normalizing taboos. Many things most decent people would be taken back by. And when it comes to their actions in doing so, they are now becoming more open about how they are effectuating this. Now let's transition to some stories to present these points. I feel like many people are going to think or comment that these are far right-wing conspiracy theories, they're on the fringe, but they really are not. This is our reality of which we live in, so I just want to present the facts to you and my opinion and let the pieces fall where they may. In the first source here, it takes place in the New York City Drag March and the Pride Parade, and they're essentially coming out and they're saying what people have been saying and that others have been rejecting, and it is really becoming blatantly obvious. Now you'll see here it's a chant. They're chanting, "We're here, we're queer, we're coming for your children." And it's to a drum line because, of course they need a musical act always associated with their protest. But I'll let you see here and let me know what you think. So, as you can see here, it was the corporate media the liberal media trying to play it off. Of course, it's always a joke. You can't take them seriously. They're there to have fun. They're not actually going after the kids. But now I'll show you the actual quote here. Now here's a retweet, but you can see the NBC News right here, the original tweet. NBC News came out and tweeted, quote, "The Coming for Your Children chant has been used for years at Pride events, according to longtime march attendees and gay rights activists, who said it's one of the many provocative expressions used to regain control of slurs against LGBTQ people." So, I mean, they're trying to take back the word groomer, essentially. I mean, if you're, like, I understand black people taking back the N-word. It's historically a very horrible word to use. And they're taking and saying, hey, I am a good person no matter what you think of me. I'm going to use this word just so you can't hold it above me. And these are people that were doing nothing wrong. And they're taking a slur against them for doing nothing wrong and going, you know what? It's our word now. You can't do this to us. But if you are actually something bad and they use a word to explain the bad thing that you're doing, you can't jokingly say, oh yeah, we are a groomer. We are grooming children. And then just dismiss it and play it off as a joke. It's like they're openly saying it, but acting like it's nothing to be concerned about. And on a somewhat similar note here, it's not quite the same as adult content, but it deals with things that adults should be interested in, not kids. And I mean, they're trying to really reduce the amount of time children are in adolescence. So, for example, here, the vice president of the country, Kamala Harris, she gave an interview to it was Teen Vogue, which their main demographic is teen girls in large part. And she's telling them, reaching out to them through Teen Vogue, she's saying that the country is counting on you. The country is counting on the youth, on the youngest women we have in our country, to push the abortion agenda forward. And I mean, you can see here, here's a news release about what she said, but here's the actual piece here from Teen Vogue. And just look at the headline. VP Harris says young voters have the power to fight extremist abortion bans. So their messaging here to young girls is that if you are not aligned with the liberal, with the Democrat plan on abortion, it's extremist. So if you believe that if a baby is fully developed in the womb, as much as it can be up to 9 months, and in some cases infanticide is legal in this country, which many people don't actually know. If you think that having any restrictions on essentially the torture and murder of babies, if you think that there should be restrictions, you are an extremist. So when young girls who are very, I guess, innocent, they haven't lived a life that an adult would to know right from wrong, when you tell them these things, you're going to kind of wire in that thought into the brain, which, like I said before, it creates that foundation which everything else is built on top of. And I mean, it really is no wonder that Kamala Harris, with actions like that, with words like that, is now, as polling shows, the most unpopular vice president ever in U.S. history. This came out through a NBC News poll. It found that 49% of respondents have a negative opinion of Kamala Harris, while 32% have a positive opinion of her, which leads to a net negative rating of negative 17. So, I mean, if you're a big fan of her, I don't know why. Comment below. Tell everyone why, because besides, I guess, maybe her husband, I can't imagine she has a lot of people wearing her t-shirts. So next I want to stipulate, before we get into this tweet here, that I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with transgender people or anyone within the whole spectrum of LGBT plus 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 plus. There's a lot of good people out there, I know for a fact, who just happen to be transgender, who happen to be gay, lesbian, what have you. And we cannot just demean them as a person because of this movement. Largely, this movement, the activist, hard left-wing movement is the problem. And they pull in this certain type of LGBT person, and that kind of becomes just the whole image of what they're about. But I guess even outside the movement, there is largely a disproportionate rate of transgender people who get involved with unethical behavior, many times arrest. If you follow Andy No, who's an excellent journalist, he released a bunch of tweets. I think he's doing this nowadays, but he did this during the Summer of Love, during the riots of 2020. There were a very disproportionate rate of transgender people that were involved with Black Lives Matter and Antifa, who were causing just mass violence and hysteria across the entire country. But, so I guess here's some more, somewhat more recent examples from Greg Price. He points out that the first transgender elected official was arrested for child adultography, if you know what I mean. Then the first army officer was arrested for selling military secrets to the Russians. All right, so it looks like they're unpatriotic, un-American, which the left-wing ideology pins you to be. And lastly here, the first non-binary government official, I think he's maybe, I don't know, he's maybe trans. He was arrested for stealing luggage from airports. Now, I'm sure you remember him. I'll get you a quick picture here. Blank on his name right now, but he was the one that was arrested for stealing luggage from the airport. And then woman's luggage, then he would wear the woman's clothing for pictures, and he was arrested for that. He was the person that I believe ran the nuclear waste for the federal government in the Biden administration. If you go through other pictures here, don't really like to judge people based off their looks, but something about this, it just doesn't sit right with me. Maybe it's just a first impression thing. Once I got to know them, it'll be more normal. Like I've gotten used, I guess, at this point to Bruce, Caitlyn Jenner. I see them on the news on a frequent basis, and it just seems more normal now to me than it used to. But it still seems a little bit off. It's a very feminized character for what physically looks masculine. So, I don't like I said, to disrespect people based off their looks, but when you see something that's off, it makes you have these kind of weird feelings. And, people are pushing children into this left-wing LGBT ideology. And I guess my conclusion here is that it is not something that psychologically kids should be pushed into, especially at a young age. They're going after children as young as infants. Target has infant transgender baby clothes. And outside of unethical behavior, they do have sad to say, they do have a very high rate of mental illness. And so the left-wing big establishment Democrats, they're pushing children into this transgenderism ideology that essentially is, when they do that, they're essentially pushing them into a sort of status, a sort of lifestyle that has a very high rate of mental illness. Not really such a shame. So this landmark study here, which came out of Denmark, so it had participants that they studied who are not American, they are Danish. So people from, Denmark in general as a country, they have been fairly liberal towards LGBT for many decades now, for a long time. So you can't say, if this was an American study, for example, you can't say, oh, they have high rates of mental illness because in America, people really look down on them like it's a major taboo and they're attacked and there's lots of violence. They don't have friends or family that accept them. This is in Denmark, which might be more liberal in that regard, where they're more accepted, more tolerated. People take them in, friends, family, whoever else, just employers, people in general. And what this study found in LGBT liberal Denmark is that there is a excessive rate of suicide and psychiatric conditions among people who are transgender. And as the subheader says, this study looked at nearly 3,800 transgender people across, over 40 years. And to pull up some actual numbers here. So it says here, quote, trans-identifying people in Denmark had a suicide rate 3.5 times higher. Or rather, that was a suicide death rate, if I didn't say that, 3.5 times higher. And a suicide attempt rate, 7.7 times higher than people who did not identify as transgender. Further, they found that trans-identifying people also tended to die younger, whether by suicide or something else. Now, that's something I'm not sure if the study specified, because I do believe they would have to filter out people who took their own life, because that can totally skew the numbers. Also, further down here, it says nearly 43% of the trans-identifying people had a psychiatric diagnosis, compared with just 7% of the non-trans identifying group. So you can, I guess, overgeneralize, overestimate here, overround, and say maybe half, or yeah, I don't want to say half or around half because it's 43%. But I mean, for the sake of arguing, just say these people need more help. Let's just say, let's over exaggerate and say half of trans identifying people have some sort of mental illness. And that's one that was diagnosed. How many people have never sought help or never been properly diagnosed? As a society, we should not be pushing children into this sort of lifestyle. Things have gotten so bad that it has become illegal in many areas across the US to even talk children out of becoming gay or transgender. I mean, to a certain point, live and let live. You can try to control other people's behaviors. But, I mean, it's sort of like a First Amendment issue. If you should at least, if you see somebody is just going through something and they are actually not that, they're just considering, because they're going through some hard times, they're having a hard time identifying who they are, oftentimes, which is a typical thing that young kids go through. It should not be illegal to talk to them and help them just kind of massage out the issues that they're going through. Now, here's a website here about where conversion therapy is banned. Now, depending on who you talk to, even talking kids out of going through essentially surgeries that sterilize themselves is violence, which I think is just a complete, it's just insane. Now, if you look here, this is just the statewide bans. So it does not include local or city, county-wide bans, which I can get into next. So you see here that 21 states plus DC have banned conversion therapy for minors. As far as partial bans for minors go for conversion therapy, the bans on conversion therapy, it's an additional 6 states and 1 territory. And then the bottom here, there are no states that have laws or policies. Rather, let me rephrase that. There are 19 states and 4 territories that have no state law or policy. So essentially, most states have outlawed conversion therapy for minors. Talk therapy for minors to figure out their identity. So this has gone back to what I've said in previous videos. If you do not support them, you are against them. There's really no middle ground here. Now, here's a story I think everyone needs to hear because it's not even really so much political. It's just so everything is anti-normal. So I'm gonna read through the article here, and hopefully it is not too dry. I'm just gonna go through word by word because I think each word here in the first 2 paragraphs is just essential. Okay, so Jessica Bates, a widowed mother of 5 children, aged 10 to 17 in Oregon, whose husband died 6 years ago in a car crash, unsuccessfully attempted to adopt siblings from foster care, both of whom are under the age of 9. Miss Bates sought to adopt both children in light of her non-denominational Christian biblical beliefs, to care for orphans, and to seek justice for the fatherless. Miss Bates applied to adopt both siblings because, in addition to the reality that some families are reluctant to adopt 2 children at once, she did not want either children to feel alone or isolated. After she was well into the process, the Oregon Department of Human Services, the ODHS, rejected Bates' application to adopt the 2 siblings because it promulgated a rule. The person seeking to adopt must accept and support the sexual orientation and gender identity of any child the state could place in the applicant's home. Further, the ODHS requires potential adoptive parents to undergo sexual orientation and gender identity training. These rules also denied Bates the ability to adopt even a newborn who clearly is unaware of their sexual orientation and gender due to her biblical beliefs, preventing her from respecting, accepting, and supporting the sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression of children, even though there does not appear to be any issue with regard to the 2 youngsters in this situation. Then goes on to say essentially she thinks that this is illegal and has currently filed a lawsuit. This article is somewhat recent. It was from April 10, 2023. Now, I want to briefly say that, I don't really mean I try to give resources from all different sorts of perspectives, but it's hard to find stories like this from more liberal websites. They are just not reported on. So I have to go in and find, I guess, what many people would criticize as biased sources. But I guess going back to the story, this woman has several children, went through a tragedy where her husband and father of her children died in a car crash. So I'm sure that kind of just really broke her down to her core. Nothing is more sad than a story like that. But she is trying to rebound largely through her faith and provide a good life for not just her and her own family, her own children, but for others. She, following her faith, went out and to adopt children, not just 1, but 2, because she sees them as a package because they're siblings. She didn't want to break up another family, probably because she knows what it's like to have her family broken up. Maybe these kids were in a situation similar to what she's gone through, except maybe both parents were in the car at the time. This is the type of woman that we need more of. This is really just a person of just perfect character. And just because she has a religion that billions of people around the world share, because she's believes in traditional values that most people believe in, she's not allowed to adopt children. Essentially what the state of Oregon is saying here is that if you are not a radical leftist, you cannot raise children, you cannot adopt children. I feel like it doesn't require an explanation why this is wrong. There is a complete backlog of parents that want children. They want to start families or extend their own family. I feel like a lot of those people are Christians. They are religious people. And they are people that really care about passing on their morals and ethics, which are not radical, they're not extremists, as Teen Vogue would say, as Kamala Harris would say. They are just people that are caring and want to breathe life into the youth. I hope that she wins her lawsuit. I think it's not sure what Oregon state law is, but I can't imagine she loses this. I mean, from the bottom of my heart, I really hope that Oregon gets bulldozered over. This is completely insane. Now, this is not something that's been unheard of. For example, even if you have kids, Democrats are trying to remove people's ability to do so if they do not accept their child's gender identity. If your kid's gay and you're just like, not a big fan, there is this new law that's, here is a law that was passed in 2017 that if you are not completely 100% accepting of your kid's gender identity, which is something that people can't even really define what that phrasing even means, because there's the whole argument of, is sex even different from gender? So if your kid's going through a phase and you're like, all right, sonny boy, this is a phase. All right, sweetheart, this is a phase. Let's talk this through, which is illegal, but let's talk this through and really help you find out who you are as a person, because that's my job as your parent. If you do that, in Canada, the government will come in and essentially abduct your children from you. They will remove your kid from the house and poof, gone, your kid's gone. All because they went through a phase and you did not accept their phase. Canada is not that far away. They're a liberal country, and we have many liberals down here in the U.S. Now here's a news story from earlier this year. Rather, it was from June 10th, 2023, so it's very recent. It was this month, actually. Newly amended California bill could punish parents refusing to affirm their child's gender identity. All right, so essentially, if you read through this article here, essentially says that if a parent does not affirm their gender identity, they will be charged with child abuse, and the child will be taken from their home. Again, this is another thing that I feel like requires no explanation. It should be very obvious that this is completely unethical, completely inappropriate. And the fact that this is even making its way through the legislature should be of concern, largely for Californians. If you are in California, I highly recommend moving out. There's been so much stuff over the past many years, especially during the you know what, that it's beyond a red flag at this point. They are a state that you cannot survive in. Yes, I've been there. It's a beautiful state. They have the beach. They have the mountains. They have the desert. They have everything. It's everything you can want in a state. Beautiful place to live. Except the government is making it a terrible place to live. It's become a joke, a meme, a trend just for people to say, California was once beautiful, and now it's not. So, for the sake of your family, or your future family, your children, wife, husband, anything, it is time to move out of California before you get the raw end of the deal here. This is not an all-inclusive list of stories about this subject, but at a certain point, I have to just cut it so I can make a video. Whether or not I am making these videos, I read stories like this because I find them interesting. But it can really sometimes get you down and you have to do something else because it really is so horrible. There are so many bad people out there who are just doing so many horrible, wrong things. And it is so dark and disillusioning knowing that it has become so culturally accepted. In part, that is why I make these videos. I want to spread awareness to the people who are unaware and to those who do know but need to be galvanized. Well, that is all I have for now. Thank you for watching, and please make sure to like, subscribe, comment, and share this video. See you next time. This is the Agency of Influence.